Episode 1: A New Darkness. Mind control is the order of the day. High in the towers of Ruin City, a darkness has grown in secret that will now be brought to the light. A new decree from the Minister of Social Conduct and Discipline was released. All citizens, by mandate, must begin the use of the new MCF system for all transactions and citizen reporting. This move on the citizens of Ruin City would be the first step towards universal control of all dominions, dark and light. Those who lived in the most mundane dimensions would taste the darkness first, but they would see it as a move towards a common good. For many years, civilization flourished in the new dawn of the MCF system. Technology moved forward, and the revolutions of atmospheric building, which gave needed space to the ever-growing population. Normal men had begun to embrace things they did not understand, and those very things would serve to harm them all. They became more and more engulfed in the development of their new dawn and lost track of who they were. Something else was seeming to write the next chapters of humanity. As time moved past in the new system of things, humanity fell farther and farther into depravity, bitterness and hatred. They had begun to lose the very humanity that brought them to this point. The overlords and powers of the most insidious desires had found themselves taking root. Citizens turned on each other, craving desires only known in dark myths and legends. A darkness that needed to be in control. Maybe it was the cry of a humanity deprived of its own soul, or maybe it was a plan to take its soul. The digital system of the citizens in Ruin City had shown them how they could strive forward through collective connectivity. But it proved itself to be the beginning of their downfall. Who knew what sinister agents were at play? Who knew that in the present moment of Ruin City, the seeds of cosmic enslavement were already active and at work? As Ruin City turned to chaos, the WTCHR system was developed. This artificial intelligence system would connect all citizens to the Commission of Morality, a global agency ran by Professor Carl Darwick. Darwick was a scientist who worked in the fields of telepathic energy patterns and neuropathway engineering. Professor Darwick had been physically altered during his involvement in experiments focused on a small asteroid that fell near his observatory. The asteroid was made of Uni 6, the first outer planetary system element to be studied. Uni 6, even in its smallest amount, carried energies that were too great to harness fully by known technologies. Through the enactment of the Commission of Morality and the WTCHR system, citizens began to obey the same call. They began to lose the desires of discord. They fell into place. Morality had won in Ruin City, but it was one of a false pretenses. To the citizens of Ruin City, life seemed to move on without too much remembrance of the turmoil before. In the eyes of most citizens, a golden age of numbness and stability had just set in. All things moved the way they were supposed to. Conformity leads to common success was the motto of the culture, and those who thought differently were reassigned. Deep in the halls of records, there were agents who pored over citizens' data and reported anomalies. Roger Hudson reported several incidents in which citizens were seen walking away from their lives in Ruin City. This was a phenomena that brought great concern with the Minister of Records. Since the mandated WTCHR system was created, citizens are not driven by thoughts or passions that exist outside of the closed society. The mere thought of doing an individual act so great as to leave the city would be considered morally apprehensible and possibly deemed illegal. Citizens branching outside of the moral codes would surely go through reassignment. Still, the exodus continued to take place, and those who left, strangely, could not be tracked. Citizens with the light of sun in their eyes walked farther and farther towards the setting sun, drawn to it, as if they could walk themselves into the sun itself. Those who began to seek, began to find. These anomalies were all open cases, and no one who had left their lives behind had been seen since their reported disappearances. These cases were all hidden by the Board of Directors of Halls of Records and the Minister of Records himself. Even though the episodes of instantaneous exodus continued, Science was working hard on harnessing the power of Uni-6. It allowed for the already existing WTCHR system to evolve. This evolution brought new sources of energy and stability to a humanitarian-deprived society. The progress drove the need to use the power source in every part of life. The problem was that no one knew what the effects on carbon-based lifeforms would be. The dawn of a scientific revolution brought the ability to aim farther, but also opened the door to their demise. Citizens found themselves trapped in their psychosis, mixing unknown elements, and new digital systems began to force the minds of the people to insanity. Some citizens were trapped in virtual prisons of the mind after opening themselves to the entirety of the digital world. Others found themselves being changed in their DNA and could only live attached directly to the system. All of society began to find themselves confused, scared, and strangely disconnected from each other. Huge crowds of people gathered, not knowing what to do, not knowing who to follow. Their mob-like confusion seemed to be organic, viral. But was it? There were those who embraced the changes and the new mental doorways. There were those who dove into the potentials of the times and took on what they thought was the next phase in evolution. An evolution that would fuse humanity with a digital system and a new unknown energetic biology from a far-off place. Dr. Cheryl Rae was one of the first to completely embrace the changes in society. Being a neuro-digital scientist, she was already working on fusing organic substances with the digital. Rae decided to be her own first test subject. She created an AI that could regulate the intake of energy from Uni-6 to manage the human side effects. Dr. Rae, gradually over time, became the first full bio-digital hybrid. Her research opened a new and strange potential for the use of Uni-6. People saw it as the fifth revolution. The government saw it as a new means to control. But who was in control of the governments? Deep in the dimensions of evil and darkness, where only thoughts of deceit and malice exist, plans of opening portals to the worlds of the unaware were moving forward. Those driven by curiosity and their own desires to embrace the power they felt have become the conduits of chaos. The lords of destruction, who only have access to most of the known dimensions through secondary influence, now have a small foothold through Uni-6. Knowing that some humanoid creations are driven by their own need to claim evolution, they searched for societies more open to suggestion and coercion. These societies will allow themselves to go after their own ambitions by any means necessary. For the lords of destruction, selfishness was the substance they needed for all of their plans to move forward. As the discoveries of Dr. Rae and other high-level scientists expanded, stable devices to measure and harness the power of Uni-6 began to be developed. The most successful devices were those created by Dr. Bernard Strawson. Dr. Strawson was a molecular physicist who worked both for the governments and the corporations in the fields of cosmic energy, quantum fields, and planetary travel. The Strawson Gate was his crowning achievement. The gate allowed for the seeking out of Uni-6 in the known universe, and the transferring of any found material through the gate. The first test of the Strawson Gate was successfully achieved by Polaris 5, a deep space vessel that was also developed by Dr. Strawson and his team. Even though the team was headed by the now legendary Dr. Rae, and was very positive about their outcomes, no one could have expected the amazing and life-altering discoveries they would make on their initial endeavor. As the gate engaged the light of other stars, other galaxies became visible through the gate. At the center was a large, brilliant and ominous sphere of what seemed like pure Uni-6. This discovery would create another massive leap in the usage of Uni-6. The Polaris 5 was ordered to begin travel into the gate. As they passed through the gate, seemingly beaconed closer by the sphere, they realized they were passing into other places never mapped, never imagined. The Polaris 5 journeyed for hours until coming upon many oddly organic asteroid-like objects, big enough to land the craft. As Dr. Rae and her team of astronauts and scientists prepared to venture into an uncharted territory and experience, the sphere seemed to give off a sense of intelligence. The team, astonished and overwhelmed, began to step out of the craft almost under its control. Rae was the first to step out into this new world. As she did, she quickly noticed how this place was beginning to encroach on the very metal structure of the Polaris 5. This place was alive and visceral. It seemed to be acting like an organism that has just been threatened. It was aware of the Doctor and aware that she was aware of it, but that didn't matter. Her internal craving to go forward was driven by fear. She told the other teammates to wait for her to come back, as losing the team in an uncharted place would be the demise of the mission. Following what she later would christen the Dark Orb, Rae walked into a surreal new world that seemed quiet but not peaceful, alive but not healthy. Amazed by what she was seeing, Rae moved on. The orb led her through grand tunnels which seemed like being inside of an enormous beast. After walking for some time in the tunnels, she came to an opening. Rae saw what looked like towers on the horizon. Her curiosity was pumping through her veins like jet fuel to a rocket engine. She felt as if she knew this place, was a part of it somehow. As she reached what looked like an ancient but also futuristic city, she marveled at the idea that this was a civilization never touched by people like her. It was grander and more mysterious than anything she had witnessed of ancient civilizations. In the center of the structures was a silver tower that exuded the presence of malevolence. But still, Dr. Rae continued to venture deeper, seeking the source of her driving desire. In the shadows of twisted worlds frozen by touches of eternal light, the warming of evil intentions brewed. Dimensions had begun to touch, to embrace. The veil had begun to thin. Long before the days of men, great energies tussled for dominance. The worlds of the lords of malice were silenced by the councils of virtue. Many have forgotten the prophecies and stories from times before time. They spoke of a rift in space that would aid darkness in creeping back to life and threaten the whole of existence, seen and unseen. These worlds hold secrets and knowledge long locked away. Knowledge that most could not bear to know. Knowledge that would twist most who would seek it. Knowledge that would potentially allow for the controlling of the universe. There are powers of time and space that have been set in motion and should never be tampered with. These powers were to only be used by the originals, the beings first created. These beings have enormous power and the will to achieve almost anything thinkable. The majority of the originals still hold the universes together in divine harmony, but there were some that fell away. They desired control for themselves. These fallen ones created devices of dark control and unleashed their powers onto existence. The War of the Lights lasted a millennia, finding the fallen ones defeated. These evil lords were frozen in their own time, using their own powers and their own devices against them. They were sealed away, never again to fester in their dark halls. Very few still remain alive in these places of shadows. The harborers of ancient evil still pay homage and hold their ceremonies to their frozen gods. As shadows stand still in the womb of darkness, life breaths into a timepiece of great significance. The clock of the Abaran was a great timekeeper fashioned by the fallen ones out of their knowledge of eternal time. They stole the knowledge and created clocks to control time and space. These clocks were instrumental in the building up of the dark forces and the ensuing first battle of the eternal aeons. Now that breath has come back to the shadows will reach back out at light. Across the known higher dimensional planes, calls of congregation could be heard. Elders and chiefs, guides and prophets gathered to discuss the emptiness of the thrones of Gid. The thrones were placed as seats of eternal wisdom. Only those who were born with the light of eternity within them could sit on the thrones. The thrones had sat dormant since the war. Eldridge, Sharan and Judah were the last to sit and reign in wisdom. After the war, they were all transfigured into the family of the eons, and the thrones lay empty until now. Counselors of great renown spoke at the congregation. A spirit of peace, tolerance and wisdom was over the proceedings. Talks of uniting the realms sparked great debate of what would become of the thrones. But the majority of the council agreed to follow the prophecies, that the times would come when shadow and light would meet again. The agreeing on that meant that the elders of light would be summoned and the realms would prepare for the inevitable. Or, though the royal guards of the thrones of Gid continued to protect the kingdom, the throne room had become a place of pleasure and degradation. Only the halls still smelled of rose flowers, only the sanctuary remained holy. Without the guards in place, even the true pilgrims would find Gid lost and merely a relic of a time long past. This injustice and time of burden did not go unnoticed. In the realms of the Great Fellowship, divine ordinances rang out through the fabric of the aeons themselves. The quickening had begun. The children of light will be stirred. Great waves of light began to radiate out of the main temple as edicts were inscribed into time and space itself. The edicts, proclaiming the rise of the children, resonated greater and greater, higher and higher, until all of the highest places were filled with the overpowering radiance of love and power. The time of great sorrow, great struggle, and great victory was upon all of the realms. High from the golden towers of Charaban, the city that sees no night, bells could be heard sounding like 1,000 notes reverberating to the clouds and beyond. The city filled with anticipation of the days to come. The main reasons why the great citadels were created had finally come. The charge of goodness over evil had begun to ring out into the seen and unseen realms. Most of the first children who were filled with the light came from Charaban because of the divine essence that rested on the city. Light-bearers and newlings gathered in peace and safety, growing in their awareness of the light and embracing their new roles in existence, that of vessels, emissaries of positive influence and the balance to darkness and evil. These children, who resided in places like Charaban, were protected where no darkness could simply enter. Unfortunately, the journey of other children was different. Just as the light began to awaken in children across dimensional time, those who waited for that exact moment to arise sent word of finding one child who was already well aware of her personal power. Wren of the Nessa realms was a child who had realized early in her life that she was special and had special attributes, special understandings. She was also a child already sent on her path by greater forces than herself. For that reason, Wren was already a target of interest by dark agents who knew of the prophecies and found it to be a perfect time to serve dark lords and dark causes, as those who live in light realms realize that they will be a part of great cosmic events. Evil prepares itself to reclaim the few moments of space and time that had been in its grasps before. The timepieces of ancient insurrection began to stir, sounds of metal upon metal, creaks and cracks from shadows past, and the slow gnashing of rusted teeth could begin to be heard in the depths of dark halls, in forgotten chambers of shadow and stone. The clock, that was built to open the portals to lower worlds where time could be warped, was now coming to life. These worlds were mostly seen as lower realms by the lords of malice, worlds dispensable and corruptible. In their eyes, these worlds were always to be conquered or destroyed. However, many other beings realized the potential weakness to evil intention these realms possess, and that their protection was of most importance. As the twisted machines came back to life, great torrents of bellowing smoke and fire began to peel back the fabric of space to reveal the first of evil's prey, the Orcadan realm. This realm consisted of dual-pattern energy forces that allowed for struggling civilizations to arise. Civilizations that were pendulums of positive and negative frequencies. The energy that threatened the balance of light and darkness once again reached out of its frozen prison into a sleeping world. The portals of dimensional time and space were opening. Prophecies were beginning to speak from the past. Even though Wren was not aware of the actual happenings in places unknown to her, she felt an unease that she had never felt before. Her heart raised with an anxiety that paralyzed her almost to the core. Wren was feeling the imminent destruction of a realm. She was sensing what only few could sense. The smoke of indignation had started to fill the skies of Jehona, the prime state of Orcadan. For the first time, governmental and private flight vessels could be seen in the skies over Jehona. This was very unusual, as their laws mandated separate flight times and airspace for civilian and governmental aircraft. Some were trying to flee from the source of the smoke, and others were trying to prepare for what seemed to be a fight impossible to win. Either way, doom was at the gate and destruction was near. The torrents of fire and smoke devoured all the life in the Orcadans. There was nothing left to salvage, nothing left to foster. The darkness had consumed the light of the Orcadans, and it had made the darkness that much more powerful. The dimension that was the Orcadans was now a great chasm, a portal of immense vastness, one that could usher entire worlds through its womb. Now that the shadows of darkness had come back to life, all worlds were vulnerable. The shadows crept and slithered into this new dark corner of existence, beginning to change it into malleable building blocks of cosmic substance. This process of changing matter's eternal essence was the ultimate plan of the Lords of Malice. Ultimately, they desired that all living substances, conscious or not, would serve dark intentions. This shift in the balance of light and darkness was not only felt by Wren. High in the chambers of Cherubon, guides of light and newly awakened children sensed and saw into the deepest parts of the portal. A dark orb, conscious, powerful and growing, was absorbing Orkandan's life force and creating its own shadow matter in its place. By the pure nature of these guides and the essence of light that was in the children of Cherubon, an orb of divine crystalline essence began to manifest in their midst. Out of this orb, a beam of radiant fire shot back into the vortex of the portal. The beam of fire reached through each of the dimension of Orkagen. These dimensions, even though few, were testaments to the humanities striving to seek the light. Civilizations that will no longer be found in the realms of light for this place had a different fate. A fate of swift and utter judgment. The fire reached deep into darkness, aimed like an arrow from the bow of the wow of the finest archer. Aimed at the source of the rift in time and space. Impact. The beam of fire had reached its target, incinerated it with the heat of 1,000 stars. The dark realm that was beginning to come into the light was Grandor, a dark stronghold of time long past. It served as a hub for gathering evil armies together and launching final attacks in the War of the Aeons. Grandor was a planetary dark body created by the Lords of Malice and was their final stand in that war. Why would it be the first line of defense now? What might the darkness hold this time? It seemed too easy for a few guides and newly aware children to send such a force of combat. It seemed that there was no defense from the darkness. No rebuttal. The energy that was produced by both the opening of the portal and the response of those who listen created a ripple in space that was felt in the farthest segments of time. Since there was already proceedings of councils pertaining to the thrones of Gid and the raising up of divine edicts, the elders of eternal waters had already begun to cultivate divine power so that the war could be waged and finally won. In the highest of the orders of men, Arundel the Wise was sought in the Temple of Dialandan to hear the final resonance and call to battle. Arundel was a high priest born and created in the light of the divine waters. He knew truth because he was born in truth. Throughout the aeons, the priesthood stood as the balance and the construct of the seen realms. Arundel spoke to the greatest of the council members of the prophecies untold, of how the light in humanity must fight for its very life. He spoke of how shadow has awakened to smoke and fire. He spoke of how malice and greed, confusion and chaos plan to devour all it can in the living realms. Wisdom and the compassionate intent of the council continued to bring in more and more divine energy to the temple. These guardians of realms, leaders of peoples and holders of deeper knowledge will be the pillars that the final conflict will be rooted upon. They will not be the ones who will fight this battle. They are now merely the conduits of eternal balance. They have already fought their battles and won. Now it is time for others to fight. It is time for the children to unite and fight their good fight.